Alright fellas, Canelo Alvarez is one of the biggest names in boxing, but he's been a bit MIA since the Berlanga fight, and there just hasn't been too much news surrounding him since. Although, I reckon there's a bit of a reason he's gone missing longer than usual. The puzzle of who he's fighting next is a bit harder than it seems. So today I'm putting on that detective hat once again to break down all the potential next options and a few you probably haven't thought about. But just before we get into who's next for Canelo, if you love everything boxing, you've found yourself in the right place. My name's Closter and I make videos on everything boxing, so to stay informed, make sure to subscribe. Now the last time we saw Canelo in the ring was in September against Edgar Berlanga, a fight which no one was really excited for and was just really another Canelo victory lap bout. And that's not disrespect to Berlanga, he's a good fighter, it's just what nobody wanted to see. So after Canelo has had back to back bouts that no one really wanted to see, us the fans are hoping that he's going to finally return with a tough fight. A fight against another big name, potentially being one of Canelo's last true mega fights before he retires. I reckon that's a pretty good place to start to address those real big fights. The one which has been floated around recently is of course Terrence Crawford. Now Saudi boxing chief Turki Al-Sheikh has shown his enthusiasm for organising this bout, aiming for a possible event in May of 2025. However, Crawford is currently sidelined with a minor injury, delaying his return to past May. Although Canelo has shown willingness to fight Crawford recently, but of course only if the money's right. And the only group that could put up this money is of course the Saudis. So it does have potential, but it's one of those fights which has more or less been kept in the headlines by people speculating on who would win the fight rather than it actually happening. It is an interesting matchup. Would Crawford outbox Canelo? Would Canelo walk over Crawford? Let me know what you think down below, but I reckon Canelo is just too heavy. Remember, he's a couple divisions heavier, and to me it just seems like too big of a factor. Although I reckon this fight is more likely than the fight I'm about to mention next. I can't see the next fight happening. And that other fight which everyone is screaming for is of course David Benavidez. Even if you're a Canelo mega fan, you just can't deny this is an all-time duck. And let's be real, this fight is never going to happen unless something absurd happens. Benavidez has gone up a division, and his next fight is lined up against David Morrell, which will be a great fight. I'm sure he would take a Canelo fight at any point in time, but it's clear that he's hunting for the winner of Bivol Beterbiev, which the Saudis seem pretty keen to make, and they especially seemed keen for Bivol Benavidez. So what happens in a couple months time might be the key for what's next for him. If he wins against Morrell, I'm sure he'll be straight over to the Saudis to chase those bigger fights, because I'm pretty sure PBC doesn't have the money on their own to make it happen. Canelo Benavidez just isn't going to happen. Yet Benavidez isn't the only one looking for a fight against one of the giants at light heavy. Of course Canelo wants payback against Bivol and has been keen for a Beterbiev fight also. If Beterbiev wins, that's going to be a fight for sure Canelo is going to try and chase down. Beterbiev with the undisputed title coming off his two hardest fights of his career, Canelo would absolutely be keen. Yet with Bivol, if he wins against Beterbiev, he would probably see a third fight, and even then for Bivol, for him to rematch Canelo, he would have to be down at 168, that's just what he wants. And Canelo doesn't want that. So the best case scenario for Canelo is if Beterbiev wins. But once again, for this fight to happen, there would need to be big money in play and probably the Saudis in play. Out of Crawford and Beterbiev, I reckon the more likely of the two is Crawford, simply because there are bigger and more favoured names for say Beterbiev to fight. If Beterbiev does win, it could include a potential move up to cruiserweight, which I could see him face off against Seiya Opetaia. Which I have to mention, if you want to watch some good boxing to kick off your year, make sure to not miss Opetaia vs Nika in just a few days time. With a solid undercard, this is an event you don't want to miss and can catch it live on DAZN. Use the link down below to support the channel. So for the big fights, I reckon if they're going to happen, they would happen later this year. But the fight I unfortunately see happening in the meanwhile is an undisputed unification fight against William Skull. I think this might be the ultimate fight no one wants to see. There are basically no names left at 168 which is significant for Canelo to fight. And I guess Skull does hold the IBF super middleweight belt he won in his last fight, so hey, there's their selling point. Canelo can become undisputed again. Yet Canelo didn't really want the IBF belt because of the mandatories, that's why he gave it up in the first place. So I don't really know why he would want it back other than the undisputed title. As well as that, it's a bit confusing who would put up the money for this fight. It's certainly the least appealing out of any of his last 5 bouts, and Canelo would of course be wanting a big payday. Although Canelo would sell tickets no matter who he fights, the pay he might want might not line up with the amount that could be generated. especially with one fight left on his deal on his PBC contract. I don't think they'd be too keen to pay a bunch of money for once again one of their fighters to fight a relative no-name. The only other fight which makes sense promotionally would be Jamal Charlo. At this point, even though Charlo hasn't been particularly active in recent years, it might still offer slightly more entertainment than the Skull fight. Charlo's big name and past accomplishments, particularly as a former champion, could at least generate some buzz and intrigue, but still in a division with limited options, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. But neither Charlo or Skull represents a fantastic choice. But let's be honest, the most likely next fight is probably William Skull. While Skull isn't the most thrilling opponent, the circumstances surrounding the fight could add an interesting twist, mainly around where this fight might take place, with many pointing to his recent visit to Japan as a potential scouting mission. The idea of staging a bout in Japan, possibly on a card with Inoue, has generated a lot of buzz. If this happens, it would undoubtedly be a massive event, blending two big names from different parts of the boxing world and creating an unforgettable atmosphere. However, there are questions whether this could realistically happen, especially considering Inoue's recent agreements with the Riyadh season in Saudi Arabia. The logistics of aligning such a matchup across these promotional and geographic lines might be a bit too complex, but the mere possibility is pretty exciting to think about. If the Skull fight does come next, you shouldn't be too surprised. While it might not set the world on fire in terms of excitement, it could serve as a stepping stone towards bigger and better things. It's what comes after that fight that really could get people talking. By then, we might see Canelo off his current PBC contract, potentially opening the door for a truly massive matchup. With fewer promotional barriers in the way, this could be the moment where he finally takes on one of the higher profile opponents that we've been clamoring for. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but now let me know, do you reckon am I right or am I wrong? Who do you see Canelo fighting next? And also let me know, has Canelo been ducking some of the bigger fights out there for him? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Yet, thanks for watching fellas, and I'll catch you in the next one.